I'm Will Bowling, pleased to be joined this morning by another Vol Network teammate, our very good friend, Brent Hubbs of VolQuest's Hit on 3, ahead of another big recruiting weekend for Tennessee football. Good morning, Brent. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. Hope you guys are doing well this morning.
Yes, sir. We have maybe hurt some feelings this morning, Brent, because we have been doing a topic of people's most heartbreaking losses. And Ramon went into 07 SEC championship. I went into another LSU loss in the 01 SEC championship, Brent. The alternate history of what could have happened if Tennessee just beats Matt Mock, Brent, I know is painful for a lot of people this morning.
Well, the 01 loss was the most significant. Now, you can debate whether there was something more painful in terms of losing on a Hail Mary or, like you lost to Florida, 3 times in a row or whatever it was. But, I mean, the fact is in 01, you're just coming off your biggest win when you win at Florida in December, and you got to beat LSU to go to the national championship game, and LSU loses their quarterback and their top running back, and you can't stop the quarterback draw for 2.5 quarters of football, and what was a really good team fell short. I don't know that they would have won the national title that year, but they had a chance to play for it, and those opportunities don't come along very often. Philip Fulmer said this, and Ramon, you would know this because you played in that game. Fulmer always said the hardest game to play was the SEC championship game, because you were looking ahead. And I remember in 98, Doug Dickey came in the locker room and told the team after they beat Vanderbilt, and they had to go beat Mississippi State. He said, and they were undefeated number 1 in the country. He said, congratulations. But as of right now, your rear ends, so he didn't use the word rear ends. He said, your asses are going to the Citrus Bowl. And they, everybody in the locker room was like, what is this crazy old man talking about? Like, he ain't even saying congratulations or nothing. But you talk to players on that team, and they will tell you the hardest game they played that year was trying to get the energy and get up to play Mississippi State in the championship game because of what was ahead of them. They were a heavy favorite, and they'll all tell you that was the hardest game to play was that year. So the championship game can be really hard. Tennessee just did not in 01. They did not handle the emotions of beating Florida at Florida. They had the parade around the track. People are, have roses in their mouths. It's like, hey, you got to go take care of business next week. And obviously they didn't get it done.
That's the
thing. That one was painful. Yeah. Obviously, that one was painful if you listen to that story, right?
Right. I remember that's the story my brother would tell me. It was like, no, everybody had roses in their mouths. Jeez. Like at halftime of that game, people had roses in Atlanta. I mean, just crazy.
If we can move to 07 then too, Hubs, I got to ask that question because that was the year UT, that was my junior year, the 07. That was the year we had the great offense. Cutcliffe was cooking, Ainge was cooking, the defense was good, man. And I remember us going into that November month and just thinking, if we do this, and this, making the SEC championship, we're going to the Sugar Bowl. That was the biggest thing, getting the BCS Bowl.
It's a big deal then.
And we lost to LSU. Let me ask you this, because Will and I talked about it. What's history like for Coach Fulmer, Tennessee, if we win that and go to a BCS Bowl in that era? Because we lost, and the wheels came off the next year, too.
Well, I mean, it changes everything. I mean, think about it. I mean, we live in a world where a year removed from going to the SEC championship game, they fired a Hall of Fame coach. Yeah. If you win that championship game, you're not firing him the next year. I mean, it certainly changes the fortunes. And Fulmer always believed, and every coach should, but he always believed that what happened to him in 08 was just a down year, that they had a really good team, that they were going to be good in 09, and they were, this was not a trend. This was a blip on the radar. Obviously, that's not what Mike Hamilton and John Curry and the powers that be thought. But Fulmer felt like he left. He doesn't feel like he's ever gotten the credit for the team that Lane Kiffin inherited, if you will, that there were good players on that team ready to go play and ready to go win. Now, could they have figured it out at quarterback that year and all those things? But to answer your question, you're not going to fire the Hall of Fame coach after he beats after he wins the SEC championship game. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, on to more positive topics now, Brent. A big recruiting weekend for Tennessee football. It feels like we're
hey, We didn't even bring up 13 men on the field.
I know. That got brought up this morning. We've had Purdue Music City Bowl get brought up, even though the stakes weren't nearly as high. But
Mount Cody in Alabama.
Take your pick on the Music City Bowl loss for Tennessee. That was most heartbreaking.
They created the 10-second runoff rule because of Tennessee for the Music City Bowl against North Carolina. You lost 2 Hail Marys at Florida. I mean, I could go on and on. Let's on to more positive.
You're right. Absolutely. So, Brent, it's amazing. Just kind of looking for the broad perspective, and maybe for the Tennessee fan that is starting to dive into some of the recruiting weeds because it's June and this is crunch time for a lot of big-time recruits. But just from the broad perspective, Brent, how much potential is there for this 2026 class? Because the number of 5 stars, including the running back Savon Heider, who's going to be on campus this weekend, Tennessee appears to be in a really good spot. Yes, it's June, but there are a lot of 5 stars. The Vols are right up there with. How much potential is there for this to be a pretty special class for Josh Heupel?
Well, I mean, it's potential. It's a matter of can you close? Can you close with Darius Gray? Can you close with Savon Heider? Can you close with defensive end Hezekiah Harris? Can you flip a couple of guys, Zion Gibson, who you just had in last weekend? I mean, they're in on the right kind of people, and the people you're wanting to get because you're beating out others. You're beating out high-profile schools for them. Tristan Keys and Tristan Givens. It's just a matter of can you close, and we're all trying to figure out what's out there in the NIL world for guys right now. What does all of that look like? Where the relationships? The one thing about Tennessee that I would like to see them do a little bit better job of is they don't get enough. To me, they don't get enough commitments coming immediately out of the official visit weekend. Now, I don't know if they don't push for it that way or what the deal is, but there's a lot of guys who leave and go think about it. They leave. You say, man, they got all the momentum, and then you look up and they're at Texas A&M this weekend, which is, Tristan Givens, the defensive end from Carver down in Georgia, Columbus, Georgia. He was always going to visit A&M. Legend Bay, great name by the way, wide receiver from Texas. It was all Tennessee on Sunday when he left town. And now he's decided he's gonna take a Texas A&M visit this weekend. I would like to see them close things down and get guys to shut things down better than what they do. I think that's a little bit of their philosophy. They're not the most aggressive and necessarily, you got to jump in now or you may not have a spot. I mean, they don't play some of those games because I think they feel like they want the guys to really want to be here. So they've got to survive some visits this weekend, and I think that's they've got guys in town the last weekend, which is what you want to try to close it out. Then you're trying to survive a couple of key visits by other guys to other schools this weekend who have been on your campus the last couple of weeks. But the potential is definitely there. They have brought in some really high-profile, really good players. It's just a matter of do they land those guys here at the finish line? Because most of these guys are making decisions here in the next 3 weeks before they get into their senior season of football. So most guys are going to be off the board. You just don't see a lot of fall decisions anymore. There's some, but not nearly what it used to be.
With that being said, how do you see them faring with other defensive guys? I know you mentioned Tristan Givens, who's going to A&M, but also Darion Albert too. Like that D tackle spot is always one of the most crucial ones, especially with the size and build of Darion Albert. It reminds me of build a little bit of like Omar Norman Lott, that type of guy. And I know Rodney Garner loves those type of explosive guys. Where they sit with the defensive side of things.
Well, that's one of the biggest news items of the week is that Albert, who's from Columbus, Mississippi, has canceled his visit to Mississippi State. He was scheduled to go see the Bulldogs this weekend. He has canceled that visit, which, if you're reading the tea leaves and you're adding 2 + 2 and getting to 4, that one looks like Tennessee is what that looks like. I think they had a great visit with him last week. He felt very comfortable. He talked about visiting Mississippi State when he left last week. His father acted like they were done. And so I think as the week has progressed, they are done. And I think that's a positive sign for Tennessee. He's supposed to do something on July 1st or around July 1st. Tennessee's also recruiting a teammate, TJ White, who's a linebacker. I think Tennessee's sitting in good shape with both those guys right now.
No doubt. They're also dabbling a little bit into this 2027 class. What does that process look like on the early stage for those guys coming up right now? As they've already got a commitment out of it from JP Peace?
Well, you're trying to get them on campus.
Just on campus.
It's what you're trying to do. I mean, some quarterbacks come off the board early. You have some situations like JP, which is, a legacy guy who grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, Loving, Tennessee. He was going to go to Tennessee. I mean, there was talk he was going to camp at Florida and Clemson and Alabama and LSU. And, when Tennessee offered, he was not going to tell Tennessee no. It was just one of those deals. I mean, he admitted, like, back in January when he came for a junior day, somebody said, what would it mean if Tennessee offered? And he basically said it means I'm a Vol. And so once they offered, it was going to be, everybody knew it was like, okay, when is this going to happen? Not if it's going to happen. But as for the other guys who are outside the state, non-legacy guys in state, you're just trying to get them on campus as much as you can. They've got their night at Neyland camp coming up on Sunday night. That's their last camp of the year. I don't know how many guys will be there for that. They had a bunch of kids in the 27 and 28 class for the barbecue deal that they did a couple of weeks ago. So right now, Ramon, you're just trying to get them on campus as much as you can, get them back for games this fall, to put yourself in a situation where you've got a chance to have an official visit with them this time next year and be in the hunt to try to land their signature. So that's what those underclassmen are about right now. There'll be a few commit really early, but outside of the quarterback, most of those guys will be doing something this time next year.
Brent Hubbs of VolQuest's our guest this morning on Ramon and Will. Brent, the big final visit this weekend for Savon Heider, the number one running back in the country. How good of a position is Tennessee in? What do you feel like he needs to see in order to break the tie, so to speak, between Tennessee and Michigan, the two teams maybe at the top of his recruitment?
Well, it's a great question, and Savon will not do an interview when he leaves or after the visit. He just doesn't do them. He just keeps everything to himself, and people around him have indicated as Tennessee and Michigan as the top two teams. I do believe that's the case. The good news for Tennessee is he was here for the 865 Live event 3 weeks ago, and he's turned around and coming back. He's been here multiple times. I think distance from home is a bit of a factor as well. Opportunity here. Darrell Sims done a really good job with him. I think at the end of the day, obviously there's NIL in play, rev share money for him in play. That'll be a discussion. I do think that, those numbers are going to be very comparable between the two schools, and it'll get back to a comfort level. Where does he feel most comfortable? And, Tennessee's showing him all the hospitality they can and trying to make him feel like, this is a better place for him to be at for the next 3 years instead of Ann Arbor. So it'll get back to a little old school recruiting for him at the end, because again, I think financially, I don't think anybody's going to be significantly ahead of the other school because of how talented he is. So it'll come back to relationships and comfort.
I know Tristan Keys, Brent, was on with some of the national On-3 guys at an interview this week saying, the money is not the end-all, be-all for me. I want development. I don't just want to go to the highest bidder. With Tennessee coming off that visit last weekend and the LSU wide receiver commit, another 5-star, going back to Baton Rouge this weekend, how much does Tennessee feel like it can survive this weekend with Tristan Keys kind of going back to where he's committed, and what's the latest in that battle?
It's a great question, too. When he committed to LSU, it was a surprise to everybody that he jumped in as quick as he did. There's some ties to LSU that he has with the coaching staff there, and I think that's, from high school, from his younger years, I think that's the biggest concern that you have. Again, I don't think there is necessarily a highest bidder there in terms of somebody who's going to offer a vastly greater amount of money than the other when you're talking about LSU and Tennessee. So I don't think it's going to be all about money. I think the question there is, where is he with Brian Kelly versus where is he with Josh Heupel? Where is he with, Kelsey Pope versus LSU wide receivers coach? I'll be curious to see who all goes on that visit. Is the whole family going? To my understanding, when he committed to LSU, Mom wasn't there. I don't know that that's set great. So I think LSU is going to have to do a really good job with Mom this weekend. He's got a younger brother. You better show the younger brother some love, because he'll be on the visit as well, and he'll be a guy that's going to be recruited in a couple of years. I think Tennessee's worked both those angles pretty well. But again, I think it's going to come down to where's he most comfortable offensively, development. LSU will obviously sell, Tennessee's offense doesn't put a bunch of people in the league or this or that. And Tennessee's selling production and Cedric Tillman and the guys we have in the league and all those types of things. So at the end of the day, I think that one's going to get down to where you're most comfortable. Where do you feel most comfortable? Who do you feel most comfortable with? Because, again, I don't think you're just going to outbid somebody for him in this day and age. I think that's changing a little bit in terms – there are certain cases where it's going to happen, but there's going to be other cases where with elite players like that, I don't think one school is just going to, be $600,000-$700,000 above some other school out there that's the other finalist.
Hubs, you speak about this recruiting. I'm always fascinated for guys' reasons for committing. And you said now like the money's just a normal part of it, so it's not the biggest thing. So my question I have when you talk about like these 5-star guys or, or school tilting or football team tilting talent, do guys consider committing to try to change or like a team around? Because it's been a while since Tennessee's won a natty. Like, are they selling, hey, you could be the piece or I'm the piece to help change this around? Because if you get a Savon Heider, Tristan Keys, Darion Gray, like that is and also with Faison Brandon, that changes a lot, Hubs. Is that part of their mindset or is it just money and who's going to, treat me the best?
Well, the money thing's fascinating, and here's why. For the elite prospects, the money's going to be pretty even, okay? Mm-hmm. For, I don't want to call him a second-tier prospect, but for a guy who is not in the 5-star elite, the money for them is different now than it was 2 years ago. Why? Because you have schools who are doing rev share of $15 million in football that 2 years ago wasn't spending hardly any money in NIL in football. And so now you're looking at some guys that you're competing with, and now maybe Cincinnati is a factor when you're head-to-head with Cincinnati on somebody. The kid from Powell High School went to South Florida this week instead of Tennessee. And you're like, wait, what? Part of that was South Florida sold him as he was going to be the man down there. NIL-wise, they've got a little money, probably, could be financially compatible to what Tennessee was willing to offer that type, that player. So for that below the 5-star elite level, those guys, the money can be different at different places. So you can be in a bidding war with those guys. I think for the elite guys, it's probably less of that. And, yeah, Faison's calling guys. He's calling Tristan Keys going, man, come be my guy. Let's go win this thing. You get some peer recruiting going that way. But we live in a world where it's a lot of individualism. And that doesn't mean that they're bad teammates or bad team guys. But these guys transfer now, and they still talk to each other. They're still buddies with each other. Hey, man, you got to do what you got to do type deal, right? So it's a little bit different than it used to be in that regard. You still work that. Does it have the impact that it had 15 years ago? Probably not. Because all these guys look at it and go, well, I can move next year if I want to.
Right.
Now the question's going to be, what are they going to do with the transfer portal window? That's a whole topic for another show. But and that may change how much guys transfer and that type of deal. But it's got a little more individualism in it right now than it did 10 or 15 years ago. Because when you made a commitment 10 or 15 years ago or 7 years ago, you were locked into that place because nobody wanted to transfer and sit out.
Right. So
everybody just rode it out. There were days, Ramon, you're like, man, I'm out of here. Yeah. But you're like, I got to go sit for a year. Well, I'm just going to stay here and fight and go win a job. Mm-hmm. Now you can say, well, I'm out of here and I can go play somewhere immediately. And that's changed the kind of the culture of it all in recruiting.
When you look at also that setup, Hubs, I was talking to Ron yesterday, Slay, and he was giving me a scenario of how guys, they rent out 5-bedroom houses. They have their own cars. They don't borrow and carpool anymore. Is there a coach anywhere or staff that can somewhat force guys like, hey, you guys need to two to an apartment, two to a house? Or do they have to stay on dorms as freshmen anymore? Is that a requirement now too? Since, they can pay for any apartment in any college city for the most part.
Yeah, no, they're not living they're not living 4 people in a 2-bedroom house,
crazy.
Over in the fort. It's just not happening. They're not they're not living in a dorm. I mean, a lot of them are buying a house, and using it as an investment. And when they get done, they just flip it. They just sell it and move on. Some guys rent, but I mean, there's some guys that they don't even have a roommate. I think there's a point in time Nico didn't have a roommate. I mean, he just lived in a house, like a house. I mean, when you were making seven figures, you go buy whatever house you want to go buy. Right. I mean, I would describe Nico's house as a modest house for someone making the money he was making, in Knoxville, Tennessee. So no, it's different in that regard. Okay. And I think that's, part of there's a couple of challenges from a team camaraderie standpoint that are a little bit different. And there's a couple of challenges from a college experience standpoint that are different. One, guys aren't living on campus early on in their careers. They're not living with roommates. I mean, what was there, 4 of you in a house?
Heck yeah, 5 at one time.
5 at one time and 4 beds, right? I mean, so it's one of those deals where you guys are friends for life. I mean, you guys had a bond there that was different. A lot of these guys now are taking online classes. They're not on campus very often. They just take a lot of online classes. And then when they get done with football and they leave the complex, they know their football teammates, but that's really all they know. They don't really get the Knoxville experience or get the campus experience because they're kind of isolated from things. And I think that's unfortunate, but that's the world we put ourselves in with all the new, all the new rules and everything that's out there, or lack of rules that's out there now. And so creating leaders, culture in your program is a real challenge, is a constant challenge, because you're probably not going to have a big senior-laden team very often. Right. So what we talked about with Tony Vitello's team that won a national title, that team was so different because all those guys had been through the battles together to build to that point. It had so many seniors who had been through that program and had been there for multiple years. They were easy to coach. They're different to coach when you're playing 4 freshmen and 3 transfers, right? And those are the challenges that coaches have, and nobody feels sorry for those coaches when they look at their salaries.
It is a brand new world, no doubt about it. VolQuest's Brent Hubbs joining us this morning, as he does every Friday at 7:20. Excellent info as always. The best of VolQuest covering Tennessee athletics. Appreciate you, Brent. Thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Yes, sir. Brent Hubbs with us this morning, presented by our friends at Ascend Federal Credit Union, your financial partner for every stage of life. We will react to that. So